Many people have said the future of South Africa is in coalitions. I personally don't want the GNU to hold together or the future of South Africa to be coalitions. Now, don't get me wrong, the elections of 2024 have been far better for South Africa than what was the last 30 years. The GNU, the Government of National Unity, or more specifically the coalition between the ANC and the DA, far, far better than having the ANC all by itself. The ANC is of course a colossal failure, a banana republic government of communists and corrupt thieves. And having the DA there has made them a little bit better. They're going out, reaching out to the Europeans and the Americas for investment. They're actually doing better as a government overall because there's a tension there, someone to hold them accountable, and they also know that that 40% that they got at the elections could very well go down to 30%.
Perfect.
The economic outlook for South Africa is far better under a coalition. The government is far better under a coalition. And the country seems to be far more stable, optimistic, and moving in the right direction under the coalition of the DA and the ANC. But yet I still don't want the Government of National Unity to last, because in truth, we can do far, far better.
Mr. President, congratulations on your election. I think today is a historic day for our country, and I think it is the start of a new chapter of building, a new chapter of cooperation, a new chapter of us putting our country and its interests and its future first. In this election, the voters chose not to give any party its own majority. In doing so, they have told us that they want us to work together.
The Government of National Unity, or more particularly, or more specifically, the coalition between the DA and the ANC, is a stabilizing factor. It's brought in a bit more stability in the way that it functions and does its job than when it was just the ANC. And we can do so much better in this way. I hope the GNU, this coalition, lasts until about the beginning of 2028. And I put it to you that we can do better than a coalition government and coalitions for South Africa going forward if we have one party, a conservative party, that leads South Africa in a very particular and simple way. We now have a course on Teachable. It's for boys between the ages of 10 and 18, about 12 men from the Bible, where we teach about manhood, masculinity, and becoming a man. Check it out. First, I would say the party has to be made up of mainly older Generation X's, the millennial generation, and older Generation Z. Not because people that are older than that can't run a government. What I'm saying is that we need a new generation. The next generation that's been educated, has been educated and lived in South Africa at the last days of apartheid, going into the transition and thereafter. That generation, I think, needs to take over and take this country in a different direction. People would say to you that we're going to have a coalition government because people are entrenched in their ethnicities, in their tribalism, in their race, and all sorts of things like that. However, I don't think that'll be the best for South Africa. That'll just lock us into the same sort of spiral we've been contending with for a very long time now, just in a different way. Across economic status, social status, racial, ethnic differences, tribal differences, language differences, those sort of things will always exist anyway. And the party I'm talking about is a little bit beyond that. They will understand how to get a certain number of votes to bring various types of people together under the same ideas, and then a very efficient campaign that uses a lot of technology and also gets onto the ground and talks to people one-on-one. This party, in my view, has to be a very conservative party that can do far better than a coalition forever sort of stance, because all the coalition will do is move to the center and a little to the left. I do not see a South African coalition between the Democratic Alliance or of any parties moving further to the right. And what South Africa needs to do, in my opinion, it needs to move further to the right. And I believe there is a gap there for a party led by mainly a cohort of millennials who grew up in that transformation time of South Africa, who think a little differently, who deal with race and tribalism and all those sort of things a little differently, a conservative party that can move the country forward. Because that sort of party will be built on 10 elements, and those 10 elements will take this country further than the coalition or the government of national unity ever could. We introduce this party and they jump onto the scene. We'll call the party the party. So the party is a conservative party made up mainly of millennial South Africans and led by millennial South Africans. And they run a very technology-filled sort of campaign, and they have a very good ground game where they go door to door for months way before the election. And here are the 10 elements of this conservative political party that will take South Africa into the future, in my view, that will do far better than a coalition. The party's first element, they believe in a limited government. This is the belief in a far smaller role for government in society and the economy. They'll try to pull themselves out of most things. They'll try to privatize as many SOEs as possible, to shut down as many government entities as possible, like the NYDA and others. They will then lower their costs as government and employ far less people. There'll be far less ministries and turn it into an office.
What do you mean by that?
Instead of a Minister of Energy, what you have is a Department of Energy with a head, and that person is like a CEO, a professional in that field. They have no political allegiance really, and they run the thing as a professional with certain key performance areas and certain goals and outcomes that are expected. And they have no real political allegiance. They're not appointed by a party per se. They're appointed by the government, and they run the energy for the country and can be hired and fired just like any government employee. They're not political. So that's what that government will do. And they will limit themselves to running the South African Defence Force, the police, the judiciary, and creating an environment where people can start businesses and employ people. They will try to leave as many things as they possibly can and stick only to the core fundamentals of what a government is there to do, which is mainly to adjudicate between the citizen, to make sure that agreements and contracts are upheld and that no other citizen is taking advantage of another and contravening the other's rights. A limited government. Second, the party will believe in individual liberty. They'll have an emphasis on personal freedoms and responsibility. I hear a lot from the far right in South Africa and from the far left about monarchies. Both of those groups are talking about monarchies. And they're talking about monarchies because they believe they'll be at the top in that leadership group, and they're trying to protect an ethnic identity or a racial identity. Whether it's people on the far right or on the far left, they're both talking about those same things. I don't have a problem with either of them on what they say. I just don't think it's the best thing for South Africa, and I don't think it's a very good idea. I think they're romanticizing a certain idea that they think they'll be part of the people who are in charge of it. That's why they like it so much, and they're basing it not on what builds a great country per se, but they're basing it on protecting an ethnic group, cultural group, or a racial group, which is fine. You're free to do that. It's a free country. However, it doesn't actually work in building South Africa. It helps you build your ethnic group, maybe, because it's not really such a good idea. It might help you do that. It's appealing because it's not the ANC government. It's in opposition more than it is for something. But the party will not subscribe to that. The party will be about individual liberty and emphasizing personal freedoms and personal responsibilities. So that they will definitely not be for social grants. They will not be for all sorts of government handouts. That's the sort of party we need. Unfortunately, with the DA and ANC, the DA on one side is very afraid of just speaking full-throatedly about BEE, and they're also kind of timid about social grants, and they believe in those. And they believe in a whole lot of other things that all equal government spending. And so does the ANC, because the ANC knows that's where the power is over the citizen of South Africa. A reminder that you can get a digital comic book emailed to you every single month when you become a member on our Buy Me a Coffee page. The party, third, will believe in free markets and economics. They'll support capitalism and oppose socialism vehemently. They will believe in a minimal government intervention in the economy and try to open up the markets so that people can start thriving. Fourth, they'll have traditional values. They'll be conservative in upholding cultural, religious, and social traditions. They will not be woke, and they will not encourage wokeness and libertinism in the country. It's the sort of party that won't encourage, if not outright oppose, same-sex marriage and abortion and things of this nature.
We have no choice but to opt for coalition government because South Africa is in shambles. The party that we had hoped would help us is doing nothing. We are starting to even think apartheid was better.
The party will also have a strong national defense and prioritizing the strength of the SANDF, protecting borders and making sure that the country can defend itself in case someone like China decides to try and take over the world or something. It will also be very serious about taking care of rebuilding the police services in South Africa, from intelligence all the way to the policeman who is patrolling out on the streets.
There is no change. A coalition government would be good for us. A coalition government would listen to us and put the needs of people first. We are really tired.
They will reform the police. With a smaller government, there will be no police minister. The National Police Commissioner will be the head cop, reporting directly to the president. This is what the Conservative government could do, and in my view, it will be better than the government of national unity. They'll have a clear course and a clear path. They will not be tugging each other back and forth, not be center-left.
Yes, South Africans need to ask ourselves, are we really ready for a coalition government? These two parties, two different views, two different opinions. And even if we say we are ready, are they ready to lead us as one political party? Because there's so much separation in South African politics.
Coalitions are not a bad thing as long as the parties that make coalition come up with a condition that will help the nation.
The sixth thing the party will do, it will implement and believe strongly in a strict rule of law. It will not waver and bow to things like corruption and lawlessness in the country. We need a country that will be brought back into law, that will not let things that are happening on the fringes and the sort of crime that's happening on the fringes or right in our faces with cable theft and things like that. It will not tolerate those or let those happen.
Some citizens are eager to see an end to South Africa's dominant party system and believe that coalition politics is the way to go.
Seventh, the party will completely affirm and stand behind property rights. It will not be for land grabs. It will not be for land without compensation. It will protect private ownership of all things, even your pension funds and your domain name, because the ANC is even trying to go after those things.
Judging by what's happening like at metros, it feels like, they really don't care, about people on the ground. Like they're only just fighting for positions. It's like they just want to eat our money, basically.
It will take time because the parties stand for completely different things. The EFF are a bit radical, and you've got the DA there standing as well on a different perspective and blurred racial lines. And then you've got the ANC also trying to push transformation.
8, fiscal responsibility, advocating for balanced budgets and limited government spending. It will not crazily spend the money, and it will look to reconcile the budgets of South Africa, make sure we're spending money in the right places, in the right amounts, and then get rid of debt as far as possible, only having debt that is useful, if at all. Looking to spend money on investing in citizens and building up the country, infrastructure or otherwise, not on social programs that get them votes. The 9th principle is that it'll be skeptical of rapid change. It'll be skeptical of rapid change and weird little movements like the GBV movement, the Fees Must Fall movement, far-right Afrikaner movements. It'll be skeptical of all. It'll treat all as suspicious. It will see no fear and no favor of color, of person, of language, of anything. It will stick to its principles, love it or hate it. It will stick to the sort of principles that it believes in of conservatism. And if anybody from any side contradicts those, they're going to have a problem with this government.
It is what it is. It is what it is.
But however, if someone is living out their beliefs and they're not breaking the law, that government will be happy to let that person carry on as well, because that will be well within their right. A preference for gradual societal changes rather than radical reforms. It will not tolerate radical movements from unions and radical ideas around minimum wage or land dispossession or secession of the Cape. It will see all as imposters because it will stick to very conservative, very slow changes. It will also act on those ideas that already exist in the system, like BEE, because that is a radical idea and not very conservative and not about personal responsibility. It'll act on those and kill those as well. It will also kill the sort of tax regime we have in this country and try to move towards as little taxes as possible, as little paid for electricity as possible, and that sort of thing. Because it's skeptical of all radical ideas. Because radical ideas are usually very bad ideas in politics. Slow, gradual changes will be preferred. The last principle is this: decentralization. Local and provincial government more than just a top-down national governance system. It will look to run South Africa truly as a republic, not in name only. Localities from the ward to the metros to the provinces, far more freedom to choose their own policies and to run their own police services and to run their own matters far better. It will look to decentralize power and look at a far more federal system than we have had under the National Party or under the ANC. If that party does these 10 things, I believe South Africa will be on a better trajectory than it's ever been before, and I think it will work better as a country than it did under the apartheid regime and under the ANC regime. I believe the party of conservative millennials following these 10 principles will do far better for the country than the coalition between the DA and the ANC ever could. In conclusion, going into the national election of 2029, I believe the GNU would have served its purpose to stabilize the country. Many say that the country will then continue into the future with coalitions therefrom. In my view, we don't need coalitions going into the future. We need a conservative party led by millennials that will use the 10 principles outlined herein, and it will lead a country into greater freedom and prosperity, stability, law and order, and flourishing. A saying, God grant that I may never live to be useless. Second, vice does not lose its character by becoming fashionable. Both by John Wesley. I recommend South Africa and South Africans become serious about considering an alternative to both the DA and the ANC. Not because the GNU is bad or the coalition is a bust. I think the coalition is far better than what we had under the ANC, and it's a stabilizing force going towards 2029. And what South Africa needs, conservative, free market, decentralized system led by a conservative party of the new generation. The case is closed, my friend. If we move in this direction, for South Africa, the best days are yet to come. Thank you for listening, and if you dare, buy us a coffee.